Have you ever wondered what would have happened if the Cold War had turned hot? The world as we know it today could have been a vastly different place. This was a time when the globe was gripped by a geopolitical tension so intense, it was as if the planet itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash of titans. The Cold War, a term that signifies the icy relations between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, was a conflict that began in the aftermath of World War II. This was not a war fought with bullets and bombs, but one that was waged with ideology, economic power, and political maneuvering. At the heart of this tension were the ideological differences between the two nations. The United States, a capitalist democracy, championed the idea of free markets and individual liberties. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, was a communist state, advocating for state control and equality in wealth distribution. These differences in ideology were not simply matters of personal preference. They were ingrained in the very fabric of each nation and were reflected in their policies, both domestic and international. Further fueling this tension was the economic rivalry between the two superpowers. Both nations aimed to be the world's leading economic power, a rivalry that led to numerous trade wars and other economic conflicts. This economic competition was not just about wealth, it was about demonstrating the superiority of their respective economic systems. The stakes were raised even higher by their imperial ambitions. The United States sought to promote democracy and capitalism worldwide, while the Soviet Union aimed to spread communism. This resulted in various proxy wars where the two superpowers would support opposing sides, further intensifying the global tension. The stage is set, the players are in place, and the world watches as the Cold War begins. As we delve deeper into this fascinating period of history, we will discover the profound impact it had on our world today. The consequences of this war were far-reaching, shaping the geopolitical landscape for many decades to come. In a world rebuilding from the ashes of World War II, two superpowers emerged, each with a different vision for the future. The United States, a beacon of capitalism and democracy, and the Soviet Union, standing firm in its communist ideals, found themselves at odds. Their ideological differences were vast, widening the chasm between them. The United States championed the individual's right to freedom and wealth accumulation, while the Soviet Union upheld the state's role in wealth distribution and providing for the collective. This ideological clash was not confined to their borders but echoed across the globe, leading to a battle of ideas, a struggle for hearts and minds. Each superpower sought to propagate its respective ideology, believing it to be the superior system, the ideal path to prosperity and progress. Parallel to this ideological battle was an intense economic rivalry. Both superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, desired to be the world's leading economic power. This rivalry was not just about economic supremacy, but also about proving the superiority of their respective economic systems, capitalism or communism. It was a high-stakes game of chess, with each move triggering a counter-move. Trade wars, economic sanctions, and other financial maneuvers marked the economic battlefield, further escalating the tension between these two giants. Imperial ambitions added another layer to this complex rivalry. The United States aimed to promote democracy and capitalism around the globe, while the Soviet Union was bent on spreading communism. This led to proxy wars, where the superpowers did not fight directly but supported opposing sides in other countries' conflicts. These ideological and economic battles set the stage for a conflict spanning decades. What started as a clash of ideas soon morphed into a full-blown rivalry, engulfing nations and shaping world history. This was the dawn of the Cold War, a silent war with no declared battles yet with consequences that reverberated around the world. The stage was set. The actors were ready. The world held its breath as the curtains rose on the most significant ideological and economic conflict of the 20th century. As the Cold War intensified, the world became a chessboard with countries serving as pawns in a larger game. A significant manifestation of this tension was the nuclear arms race. This was a period of terrifying competition where the United States and the Soviet Union vied for nuclear supremacy. Both nations stockpiled an alarming number of atomic weapons, enough to obliterate life on Earth multiple times over. The fear and anxiety this created were palpable. People lived under the constant shadow of a possible nuclear war, a war that could wipe out humanity, but the Cold War was not just fought in the shadows of potential nuclear annihilation, it was also fought in the jungles, deserts, and cities of third-world nations. These were the proxy wars, conflicts where the superpowers backed opposing sides but did not engage directly with each other. Consider the Vietnam War, where the United States supported South Vietnam in their fight against the communist North, backed by the Soviet Union. Or the Korean War, where the US sided with South Korea against the North, again supported by the Soviets. And let's not forget the Afghan War, where the roles reversed, and the US supported the Mujahideen against the Soviet-backed Afghan government. These proxy wars were devastating. They led to the loss of millions of lives and caused unimaginable suffering. Instead of fighting each other directly, the superpowers used other nations as their battlegrounds, wreaking havoc and pulling these countries into their sphere of influence. The world stood on the brink of nuclear annihilation, and nations were torn apart by wars fought in the name of ideology. This was the reality of the Cold War, a time of tension, competition, and conflict that left lasting scars on the global landscape. One of the most visible symbols of the Cold War was the division of Germany. The country that had once stood united despite its tumultuous history found itself cleaved into two halves. This division was not merely a geographical separation, but a representation of the ideological chasm that had formed between the two superpowers, reflecting the broader split of the world during the Cold War. Following World War II, Germany was divided into two distinct states. The East was controlled by the Soviet Union and became a communist state. The West, on the other hand, was influenced by the United States and its allies, adopting a capitalist democracy. This division was more than just a political separation, it was a physical manifestation of the ideological differences between these two superpowers. The Berlin Wall, a concrete barrier that physically and ideologically divided Berlin from 1961 to 1989, became the ultimate symbol of this division. It not only separated families and friends but stood as a stark reminder of the deep-seated tensions between the East and the West. The wall was not just a barrier that kept people in or out, it was a symbol of the world's ideological divide, a visual representation of the Cold War's Iron Curtain. This divided Germany served as a microcosm of the wider world, split between the democratic, capitalist West and the communist East. The division led to a constant state of tension, with each side suspicious and fearful of the other. It was a world where one's allegiances could define their fate, and where the threat of conflict was ever present. This division of Germany, and by extension the world, into two rival blocs was the embodiment of the Cold War. It was a stark reminder of the ideological, political, and economic divisions that had come to define this era. It was a symbol of a world in conflict, a world divided by fear and a world in need of reconciliation. As Germany was divided, so too was the world into two rival blocs. In 1991, the Cold War ended, not with a bang, but with the collapse of the Soviet Union. This marked the end of an era of ideological, economic, and military rivalry between two superpowers that had held the world in a state of suspense for over 4 decades. The dissolution of the Soviet Union, followed by the reunification of Germany, signified the victory of Western capitalism and democracy over Soviet-style communism. However, the end of the Cold War did not mean the end of global tensions or the cessation of power struggles. Instead, it gave rise to a new world order, one with its own set of challenges and complexities. One of the most significant legacies of the Cold War is the continued presence of nuclear weapons. The arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union resulted in the creation of a massive nuclear arsenal, much of which still exists today. This continues to pose a significant threat to global security and peace. The end of the Cold War also led to a shift in the global power dynamic. With the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States emerged as the world's sole superpower. However, this unipolar world is giving way to a multipolar one, with the rise of new powers, such as China. This shift has led to new tensions, rivalries, and conflicts, reminiscent of the Cold War era. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine, for instance, is a stark reminder of the lingering tensions between the West and Russia, the successor of the Soviet Union. The geopolitical game of chess continues, albeit with new players and in different arenas. Moreover, the ideological divide that characterized the Cold War has not entirely disappeared. Today, the world witnesses a clash of values and ideologies, not necessarily between communism and capitalism, but between democracy and authoritarianism, open societies and closed ones, human rights and state control. The Cold War may be over, but its legacy continues to shape our world today. It's a legacy that reminds us of the perils of ideological extremism, the dangers of nuclear proliferation, and the necessity for diplomacy, dialogue, and cooperation in addressing global challenges.